Hello, TNA fan. We're back again to talk more TNA wrestling shenanigans, and today I want to talk about Santino Marella's possible last match. Now, it hasn't really been talked about that much because, like, we've felt for a while maybe this guy's already retired. He's already in another role, but he's had a few matches here and there throughout the last few years and whatnot. But I think he does want to continue to have these sort of more built up one-off style matches. I think that is a great use for him in one way. I know some people say, oh, he's just a commentary character or he's just a jobber character. That's fine in some ways because you need variety in wrestling. You can't just have the serious, stoic, you know, wrestling all the time. You've got to have something else and then something else. And, it's got to be a variety show. You can't just have a one-note show. You've got to have something else and like here's your, I hate, TV soap operas, but you've got to have your TV soap operas, melodrama sort of stuff. You've got to have your, you've got to have your sort of wacky, sort of comedic sort of stuff. You've got to have your, like, especially for promotions that are focused on, like, the more of the entertainment side and more of the storytelling side, which I think TNA is kind of on. The more spooky, the more surreal, the more nuanced sort of takes to certain things. Like, yes, as well, like real things, like dealing with somebody's drug and alcohol, problems, but doing it in a nuanced way, not just being like, I don't know, crass or whatever else, not being able to handle it in a way that, yes, it gets heat, but it gets heat in the right way, and it feels like you're not just putting this person back into a position of, like, they're going to go back downhill or whatever else and all this other stuff, and people feel like, oh, this is done in poor taste or whatever. No, it's done in the taste of this person is a heel and an asshole, and such is going to get their comeuppance one of these days type thing, that kind of thing. We're not just having somebody take a loss or take a moment or whatever else it is. We're building a narrative and building a pathway and drama and stakes, and we're building that adversity for this person that they've got to overcome. We're showing that or talking about that issue that they've had or whatever. Same thing for your Santino. Like you're building this narrative for him slowly kind of thing. I don't know exactly what, like, narrative he kind of wants to end it on, but I think this could be a good narrative to end it on. Like, honestly, it's a really good narrative. And, like, how many more years has he got? Like, really? Like, and he could make a comeback here or there or whatever else it is, but to be officially, he's sort of unofficially retired, but to be officially retired, I think, like, a match in this story could really work well. And I think a lot of people would actually be really interested in seeing it. Like, at Rebellion, if you build up to it between him and Stax, I don't think that he's gonna, like I said this before, I don't think Santino's the type of person or the person that you should say, hey, he's gonna win our belt back for us, because he is, one of the top brass, so to speak, at least in storyline on TV. So if he's in that position, it's a really, like, bad position for him to be in as the champion, because he can book himself, to do whatever. So it's not a really great position to be in. And, like, really to book himself into being in that position, like, you have to feel like he's more or less forced into it. Not saying that he really wants to do it, he has to do it, you know. But there has, like, I feel like the stakes still can be there with, like, Ariana and whatnot. But it's like, since she's turned heel now, and I think we kind of, some of us kind of saw that coming to some extent, because she was acting more heel in NXT already, and whatnot. But now it's official in TNA, I guess, more so. Um, Now we're getting to see more of that now in TNA, rather than it being like we're pretending this other stuff didn't really happen, or maybe it's just a little bit less than what it was portrayed to be, or whatever. I don't know. But still, this narrative for him, it isn't really going to come full circle, so to speak, here. Like, but I feel like if he puts everything on the line and says, hey, if I can't get it done and whatnot, to bring this belt back, I will retire from in-ring competition. I think that that's great. I think that that's like setting the stakes, really high. Like, it's not just, for the title. It's for not bragging rights, I suppose, but it's for, for love and for family and for, Santino. Now it's, his last match, potentially, and which I think it should be, like, in some ways. Like, what else can he do, realistically? Like, I really don't even want to see him in many more matches that much. Maybe one or two here or there, just to say, hey, I want a match or a tag team match or something like that against you, and have that building momentum and saying, hey, look, I did pin you like last week or whatever it was. I can get this done. I can win that belt. I am not just a deadbeat or whatever else, all this stuff. This is my time to finally showcase what I can really do, and not just be a joke or whatever else that people have said that I have been for my whole friggin' career. Ended on a big note. That's a great narrative to end on in many ways. Like, if, like, a few years down the track or whatever, they're obviously going to have another angle later down the track one day or something. And again, this is an angle on TV. So again, even if they really don't have that, like, on TV that much, it's like, well, so what? It doesn't really matter all that much, because behind the scenes, like, this is professional. This is about, I'm assuming WWE saying, hey, we're kind of already going in that route of her being heel, so we want to make sure that she's turned heel on your side, so that when she's over there, she's getting heel reactions and whatnot, and we're not confusing the story or whatever with saying, oh, she's babyface over here, but she's basically heel over here. So, like, yeah. or it's complicated or whatever, but yeah, like, I don't know. You could always say that Santino could always have a purpose or a porpoise or whatever, to be in there and to do something with somebody, because he knows this game. He knows this game. He knows how to pull at people's heartstrings, man. He knows the dance. Look at when he nearly won the world title in the Elimination Chamber a few years back, whatever it was. Actually, it was probably just about a decade or more ago, wasn't it? But yeah, like, still, like, people, and there were other moments as well, but, like, not just comedy moments, but, like, there were other moments. And I think, like, again, the Santina stuff, maybe, I don't know whether you want to bring that into this, but it depends to me to say whether you should or you shouldn't. because I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think that could be part of it in some ways or whatever. That would be like trying to close the book on that thing and saying, hey, I did what I had to do, or I did this thing to to do the thing that I was paid to do, or whatever in the field that I am passionate about, and da da da. Um, yeah, I think that there could be a story there, but I do think that it's sort of like a bad thing that a lot of people cannot, get past and will not get past. So it's like, never. I don't know whether you should touch it with the 10-foot pole. I don't know. So there's that there, but I still think like with or without it, you could I think you could do without it. That's the point, I think. So in that regard, I think you would be better off not going there and not taking the chance than going there and saying, oh, damn, that's actually damaged the story, or it's taken it too far to another thing, or whatever else it was that, realistically, we should just forget that really ever happened. And maybe that's where you take it. Maybe you should actually just say that and say, hey, you bringing that up, people just want to forget about that. I wanted to forget about it. What I did in the name of, we're doing the passion that I love, da da da, rah. Like I said, but again, it's sort of like, yeah, I don't know whether it's a bridge too far or not, but yeah, it's just a bad angle and a thing that's like people want to forget. But it is something that WWE did. But again, so I don't know. Just to hang on to that for TNA, I don't know whether that's a compelling part of the story. So that's where I'm like, well, is this really something that fans care about? The problem being with like me saying that this is how, like, where I'm seeing it is like, again, it feels like that means you've got to have you've got to have somebody else like along the road building along to get there. Like, obviously you've got Macklin, but I feel like, again, I said this before, Macklin and a few other guys really need to be fighting for a main event slot. Like, and like I said this with how you could like rethink to book the sort of the mid card title, which is the international title. The X Division title is a separate division title, which sometimes is a mid card title, sometimes is an upper main event title, sometimes is a opening match sort of title, just to fire up the crowds or whatever else it is, but it should be respected on the level of, the one of the biggest prizes, as well. It should be like looked at as like the women's title for younger, more athletic wrestlers or whatever, rather than just the other mid card title that's been around for 20 years or whatever it's been, but certainly it operates like a mid card title at times as well. So yeah, but anyway, still so my question would become, who gets in that position? I don't know, dude. And maybe there's somebody else that's sort of somewhat more new to the roster that could fit into that position. Maybe Bear Bronson. I don't know, like in 6 months' time or whatever it is, maybe 8 months' time, whatever it is, 9 months, whatever it is. I don't know. You could get to that point of, if you've built him up long enough and consistently, yes, he can suffer losses in storyline as long as it's to build him back up or whatever else it is. It's not just, we're going to tear this guy down and he's going to lose and lose and lose and lose, or whatever. It's the same for everyone. They need to have wins and have losses sometimes, absolutely. But if you're building somebody up, they're going somewhere. You're not just saying, oh, well, we might try to see what you can do. Nah, we won't see what you can do. We're just going to stay with our established guys and not really change anything. Oh, wait, what? We don't have any other main eventers. Oh, shit. Okay. Panic. Let's push somebody really quickly. Like, that's the problem. You shouldn't have to, like, even in the mid-card, like, you shouldn't have to panic push somebody. That's why you should always be building new stars so you can feel like, okay, if this other person isn't here, or is injured, or is signed up at WWE, or whatever else is going on, at least we have these other people that are waiting in the wings, that are, like, ready to go, or signed up at the AEW, whatever it is, whatever. Or, whatever. Yes, we have these other guys ready to go, or we can pick some guys from the indies or whatever else it is and say, right, come on up, let's give you a chance on prime time, and, we'll see if we can make something with you, And Bear, he's there, so, like, and he's getting this world title opportunity, so he could have a good future. So Santino isn't going to be the guy to win that belt again. Like, so, and you're, like, I'm assuming you're still going to have it on Stacks after that for another 3 months or whatever it is. So I'm looking at maybe Slammiversary time. I don't know. Maybe even Bound for Glory time. Don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But that is an awfully long time for it to kind of hang in the air in one way or another. But, like, if Santino does win it, I see that he'd have to vacate it, because I think that, yeah, and I just don't see him winning. I really don't. I don't see him winning. But yeah, like, because he's, like, older, and, like, Stacks really needs the wins. Like, like, even though I'm not super, like, into this whole, like, we'll help the NXT guys, like, I don't know, like, they've got all the help they really need. Do they really need to beat TNA guys? That's another thing where I was saying, hey, why is Leon being sent over to NXT to lose to AJ and Dragon Lee, and then lose to Oba? What's that about? Like, what's that for? Like, you know what I mean? like, and again, if maybe, I don't know, like, they've done this a few times where they've done some of this stuff, they've suddenly brought it over to NXT, and I'm like, well, why? Well, maybe it's because, like, NXT has a bigger audience, or had a bigger audience, and they have a bigger network. They're still going to have a bigger network and a bigger audience in many ways than TNA is on AMC, but, like, again, it sort of feels over-reliant on NXT in some ways to tell the story that's already kind of happening. So it's kind of like, well, and again, like, to really follow the story, like, are NXT fans gonna really tune into TNA to see, like, this 1 or 2 moments or whatever, or are they gonna watch the highlights? Or are they gonna wait for WWE to play the highlights of it? Maybe. That's probably more or less what's gonna happen. Or are they just gonna wait to see it actually on their TV screens? Like, they've already seen some of it on their screens, so, like, they're obviously going to see more of it on their screens, but are they going to go out of their way? Well, not out of their way next year, but right now, are they going to go out of their way to see some of this other stuff that, one random lower card guy is doing in TNA just because there's a big story around him and Ariana, sorry, and Santino? I don't know. That's what I mean. Like, how much interest is that going to bring? And like, it is like a big angle. That's the thing. Like, even though I'm saying there, it's like, well, what interest is that going to bring? It is a big angle. Like, and it is a big story. So it's like that could bring the interest, but it's like just the idea that it exists and they're cross with each other is like not really like if it's not going to build to a match or some sort of payoff, then I don't think people are going to really tune in to see it. Like realistically, that's where you've got to create the episodic nature of TV, where it's like you must tune in to see what happens, not just see the clips or see the highlights or see whatever, or hear about it or whatever, see it next week or next month or whatever it is, or in 3 months or whatever it is, when they finally kick it off at the pay-per-view. No, you've actually got to see this happening or something else happening. It's not just saying there's this thing happening, it's saying there's, that's why, like, I do think that this is important. It's like, or important enough to go somewhere, and important enough to go for possibly Santino's, retirement, which I think would be, well deserved in many ways. Like, he can just be a backstage character and whatnot, and maybe like make surprise returns here and there. Like, he could be in battle royals or whatever else, or do certain things when the time is called for it or whatnot. But like, again, I think his in-ring career is pretty much over, and like, he should be in that position of saying, well, I'd rather have, people remember me for, like, even if I was a comedy character, I'd rather people remember me for being at my peak and being at my best, rather than like slowly going downhill in the next like 5 to 10 years and continuing to wrestle and continuing to plod on. I could still do some stuff, but like in a more like limited capacity, just, little spots, little things, little moments, whatever, not, serious, or more than 5-10 minute matches or whatever, maybe. Or if I'm with the partners or whatever, that's a bit different. Maybe I can be in that 15-minute match and I'll only contribute 5 minutes worth of stuff or whatever to that match, but, or real things to that match. But yeah. But yeah, no, like, that's where I'm at. I don't really know, like, that mid-card, upper mid-card is sort of a little bit thin right now. So, like, I don't know who's going to take that belt, but I'd like Bear to get it. I wouldn't mind. I think there's a bunch of other guys that are there, though, that are, like, well-deserving. Like, a bunch of the Rascals are very well-deserving of holding something like that. Though, even though I say that, they're really like a tag team or a faction type thing. So you really should look at them being like, they're a tag team, they're a unit, they're this, they're that, whatever. So let's focus in on them being that, rather than being, individual stars on their own or whatever. I don't know. They can try to be individual stars on their own, but they're better as a unit, I guess. And that's the thing about, like, trying to make great tag teams or great factions or whatever. Like, yes, some of the members can have some success outside of that, but it's like they're better as a unit, they're better as a tandem, they're better, like, generally they've got more success tandemly than what they'll have, as single stars, because that's what they're here for. They're here to be the next Hardys. So, or at least in my opinion, so you need to build around them. Build around them. Give them a motivational reason, a real motivational reason, especially like Wes and Wentz. I always get their names like a little bit confused because their names are very similar. Yeah, especially those two needing to win the tag titles. They've sort of repaired their brotherhood or whatever it is, but they need to win the tag titles. They need to get them to solidify that they are a unit, they love each other, they're brothers, the past is in the past, whatever, all that sort of stuff. They need this. So that's something that I think you should narratively try to do. And whether they're going to win it off the Righteous or whether they're going to win it off whoever or the Hardys or whatever, that is up to you guys. But like, I do think that that should be their story. And this should be Santino's story. And the Hardys' story and so on and so forth should be, we're just trying to hang on. We're scrambling to hold on. We're barely hanging on. You know, this sort of thing. We're doing everything in our power. Like, I don't think you turn them heel because they're just too goddamn popular. But I do think that showing them as just barely able to hang on, you know, every time is like what you should be doing with them. They are guys that can only just be there, only just, you know, keep that flicker of something alive, you know, not that they're the best, like they were the best, but they're holding on to that, you know, just barely. It's really slipping through their fingers. They're not able to, you know, maintain that because it is something that, you know, is ever elusive, so to speak, but they are, you know, they are who they are, and they just deserve a lot of respect for many reasons. But you know, and I do think that in some ways it is disrespectful to show them in such a light of saying, oh well, you know, they're the greatest, you know, because you know they were that, but now they're not. So you're actually doing them a disservice, you know, in a way. And you're doing a disservice to everyone else. But anyway, I will get off that high horse too. And yeah, I've pretty much talked about everything else with Santino and whatnot. But yeah, it is interesting to think about like where everything else is kind of going as well at this time. Now, I think as well, I've said this on a few episodes, and I might make one more specific episode like this very soon, where I'm just going to say that I might not do very many more of these like side videos or side podcasts anymore, because there is too much else to kind of do, and I am full up doing those other things with other podcasts and with other things. So I'm going to have to divert my attention to those. And yeah, that is what it is. So you're only going to start getting the, like I might do some for the AMC stuff debut. Yes, that's a bit different. But from there on out, I think you're only going to get the Genesis or the pay-per-view, like previews and reviews. I'm not going to go through discussing different things here and there because I just don't have the time, unfortunately. So I might make a video. I think I am going to make a video about that. So be sure to check that out, and I hope you have enjoyed this one, and I hope you will join me again in another one.